Hey guys, welcome back to Kiksta. I just got back earlier from watching the movie The Jesus Revolution, which is a movie based in the 60s about basically a kind of a Christian revolution that was going on at the same time as obviously the hippie and sexual revolution, especially particularly in America. So this movie stars Kelsey Grammer from Frasier's Frame. He plays a pastor in this movie, and the second main character is a character named Lonnie Frisbee, and he's played by Jonathan Rumi of a show that you might not have heard about, but it's really big at the moment called The Chosen, where he plays Jesus in that show. So this movie has a few some really great actors in it, not lesser known ones, but some really great ones in there. And yeah, it's a story set in the 60s about a revolution revolved around spreading the word of Jesus by a group of hippies. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this movie and I want to delve into them. So I'm going to start first with the positives and then we'll move into the negatives and go from there. So the basic premise of the film is Kelsey Grammer's character, Chuck Smith. He's a pastor who has his own little chapel, and it's kind of a failing chapel. It's very tired and bored and not uninspired and looking for just some rejuvenation, but he's kind of set in his ways. He has a very militant and traditional approach to his faith and just basically going by the book and resulting in an uninspired parish that he lives with. Meanwhile comes along Jonathan Rumi's character Lonnie, who is a hippie. Well, I should say kind of a reformed hippie in the sense that he was a hippie who was doing drugs and sex and all the kind of debaucherous sides that come with being a hippie, and he reformed from that to be a Jesus-loving hippie. But he's still a hippie. Anyways, he comes along and starts kind of preaching this message of, kind of church and learning about Jesus can be fun, and we should bring in all these colorful people into the fold to really help build this church. And Kelsey Grammer's character Chuck is apprehensive at first. He doesn't really trust this guy. He doesn't like his style. He's kind of put off by the whole hippie thing. And this is during the 60s, obviously. So there's a lot of strong opinions going around on both sides about what people thought about hippies at the time. And so he tentatively lets him in and sees like that he starts, through his kind of charismatic style, starts to build up the church, his following in the chapel there, and it starts to grow. Now, that's just setting a scene about basically where the story is, how it starts and what it's about. My thoughts about it, what I liked. So I love the way they started this movie, and it kind of really presents the ethical conundrum of the time, which is how do you reconcile the more traditional militant side of the Christian faith with the more progressive and hippie peace and love side of the faith, both who equally want to worship Jesus in their very different ways. But so how do you reconcile the two? And that's really what the crux of this story and what it's about. It's about how do we reconcile them. And I thought it's a really cool premise for the story, and I was really interested to see where they take it. And I thought they did a great job of kind of showing that bond and showing in a realistic way. Obviously it's based on true story, so I'm taking the word of giving the benefit of the doubt to the creators that they know what they're doing here, that they're presenting the story as it happened. Obviously there's going to be liberties taken, but I'm trusting that they are telling the story more or less as it's meant to be told. My other positives to say about the film is the acting is really good. It's really on point. Everyone does a great job. The story is an engaging story. It's not one that I think the average person would know. I think most people wouldn't know the story. I certainly didn't. I went in completely blind to this film. I had no expectations going in. I'd heard some good things, and obviously I'm a fan of The Chosen. So Jonathan Rumi's character really was the big draw for me. But even going back to the Frasier days, I was a big fan of Frasier. So I like Kelsey Grammer in that regard. And so I was keen to see how it turned out. And performances on all sides were great. And the story from the starting point is really good and really strong. And it deals with some very interesting themes that I'm personally interested in too. Now, the issues with this film. The main issue with this film is, I would say, is the film editing, because the film starts off with such a clear purpose and story, but even though that is kind of rushed a bit, the way that Kelsey Grammer's character, who's a pastor, trusts the hippie, kind of happens really quick, and like I can kind of forgive that for the sake of like, let's get the story started. But it does happen a bit quick, and it just seems a little unbelievable that his trust would work that quickly, particularly when he's such a traditional man who does not trust hippies or that sort. So that forgetting that point, the movie kind of evolves 2 or 3 times throughout into what it's about, and that was kind of jarring for me because I was really invested in the first third of this movie, the opening act, which is promising a story about kind of reconciling those 2 sides of the faith. But it kind of moves from that at one point. About halfway through, it turns into a story that's more about Jonathan Rumi's character, Lonnie, who kind of develops a bit of an ego in his preaching and kind of sees himself as a prophetical figure, and he's getting a bit in over his head and saying and doing certain things during his sermons that just aren't, they're a bit awkward and a bit uncomfortable. And so it becomes more about almost a story of like a fraud kind of story, and how is this guy a fraud, is he not, what is this really about, is he really performing miracles, or is he lying, what is it about? It becomes more about that and less about the reconciling the 2 sides of the faith. That's in the middle portion of the film. But then the final third becomes more so focused about another character I haven't mentioned yet, who is a younger guy whose name I forget, but he's basically got 2 main stories. One to do with his mum, who is an alcoholic, and he has issues with her, but he loves her, but she's kind of a burden on him and whatnot. And at the same time, he has a love story. So he falls in love earlier on in the movie with a hippie, and they both become hippies, like the kind of peace and love type of hippies who go around doing drugs all the time and this and that. And they both basically reform and when they encounter Lonnie's character, he basically welcomes them into the church, and they become reformed and start preaching their own. And so the final third of the movie becomes more about that kind of aspect of his relationship with his girlfriend and with his mom. And it just, like, I just kept wishing it would come more back to the initial ideas of film. Again, I understand it's based on a true story, so they're assuming these were all things that happened as part of that overall story. Sure, they wanted to present them, but I felt those storylines about the fraud and about the younger man with his journey should have taken a back seat to what was the more interesting story that takes place mainly in the first act. And I would have liked to have seen that explored in more detail throughout, and those things just kind of been more subplots rather than as prominent as they were. But otherwise, I enjoyed the film. I had a great time with it. I would definitely recommend it to go see it if you don't need to be that interested in the subject matter. I mean, no, obviously it's set in the 60s, it's an older school type movie. It deals with issues that are from decades ago, but it's still very relevant because it shows this relevant issue of 2 sides of the faith, or and dealing with that, and how this kind of issue still comes up in today's world, just in slightly different ways. But there's still a lot there to enjoy about it, and that's thought-provoking enough so that when you walk out of the theater, you're not just dismissing anything that's discussed. It actually has some interesting topics that you would discuss with whoever you went with. So definitely recommend it. Great performances on all sides, an interesting story, some issues with the film editing throughout, as mentioned. But yeah, look, if it wasn't for those issues with the editing, if it had gone the way I wanted, this could have been easily a 9 out of 10 film. But because of that, I probably have to go with a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. So still had a great time, and definitely recommend it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the film. Hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. I would like to hear your thoughts too. If you have any, by all means, put them in the comment section below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video and my other content. Yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks guys. Bye.